This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about a system that behaves perfectly, perfectly predictably, and perfectly destructively. You are being conditioned to celebrate the wrong moment, a moment that feels like relief, like winning, like something finally going your way. But relief can be engineered, and when it is, it becomes leverage. Right now, a quiet shift is underway. Not loud enough to interrupt your day, not sharp enough to trigger panic, but large enough to rearrange the structure underneath your life. Prices will fall, people will relax. Decisions will be made that cannot be undone quickly. That's the danger, not the shock. The calm before it. If you've ever wondered why crises feel obvious only in hindsight, stay with me. Because this pattern only reveals itself once you know where to look. And once you see it, you can't unsee what comes next. This story doesn't start with a spike. It starts with something much more seductive. You think power in this system sits with governments or companies or people whose names you recognize. It doesn't. What actually controls the system now is price expectation, not price itself. Expectation. Markets don't wait for oil to flow. They move on the belief that it will. They rewire behavior in advance. When prices fall, it isn't interpreted as a temporary condition. It's treated as a promise, a signal about the future. That signal tells cities where to expand, tells companies what to build, tells families how far they can live from their lives. And once those decisions are made, they harden. Concrete hardens, debt hardens, habits harden. At that point, it no longer matters who controls the oil. What matters is that the system has reorganized itself to need it. That's the trap. Control doesn't come from owning supply. It comes from shaping dependency before anyone notices they're dependent. And this is where the danger accelerates. Because the most destabilizing changes are the ones that feel reasonable at the time. What's happening now looks ordinary. That's why it works. Before this pattern takes hold, something subtle always happens. So subtle, it barely registers. Nothing breaks. Nothing explodes. Nothing feels wrong. What changes is the baseline. There was a time when energy volatility was assumed, when instability was priced into decisions, when flexibility mattered more than efficiency. Now, volatility is treated as a glitch, an interruption, something central banks, markets, or technology will smooth out. That shift didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, through repetition. Each cycle trained the system to believe that the low point was normal, that cheap was permanent, that the spike was the anomaly. Before, people asked, what if prices rise? Now they ask, why wouldn't they stay low? That difference changes everything. It changes how far cities stretch, how debt is structured, how supply chains are optimized to the edge, and optimization removes slack. Slack is what absorbs shock. When slack disappears, systems don't bend. They snap. That's the silent shift. Not ignorance, confidence. And confidence is what makes the next moment feel like an accident instead of an outcome. Because once the baseline moves, the system becomes fragile without realizing it. And fragility doesn't announce itself. It waits. Then something happens that feels like proof. A data point, a headline-sized moment that looks decisive. A government announces a shift. Markets respond instantly. Futures move before a single barrel changes hands. Nothing dramatic on the surface. No emergency meetings. No rationing. Just numbers sliding quietly in one direction. Prices start to soften. Commentators call it rational. Analysts call it supply coming back online. And for a moment, they're right. Because oil markets don't need certainty. They only need enough belief to move capital. Enough belief to change plans. So companies adjust forecasts. Producers delay investment. Consumers feel a little richer. This is the moment that feels like stabilization, like the system correcting itself. But what's actually happening is more dangerous. The system is committing to a future that only works if this condition holds. If access remains open, if politics stay quiet, if nothing interrupts the flow, that commitment doesn't show up as panic. It shows up as confidence. And confidence, once locked into infrastructure and debt, becomes very hard to reverse. If this feels like relief, pay attention. Relief is the signal, because the shock isn't here yet. This is just the setup. Here's the part most people never see. Because it doesn't look dramatic, there is no switch, no single decision, no moment where someone chooses the outcome. The mechanism works through incentives. When supply looks abundant, risk tolerance rises. Not emotionally. Structurally, refineries reconfigure to handle specific grades of oil. Shipping routes are optimized for distance, not resilience. Domestic production becomes inefficient by comparison, so it slows. Quietly, capital flows away from redundancy and toward yield. Why maintain backup capacity when prices signal stability? Why pay for flexibility you're told you won't need? And this is where damage is assigned. The benefits concentrate early. Lower prices, higher margins, short-term growth, the costs are deferred, pushed onto households, onto workers, onto regions that now require cheap energy just to function. No one absorbs the damage yet because nothing has broken, but the system is now asymmetric. Upside was captured immediately. Downside has been stored for later. That's the hidden mechanism. It doesn't rely on bad actors. It relies on rational behavior responding to a distorted signal. And once enough of the system is tuned to that signal, it becomes sensitive, hypersensitive, which means the next disturbance won't need to be large. It just needs to arrive. Then the tempo changes. Not slowly. Suddenly, signals start to conflict. One number up, another down. Markets hesitate, then react. Investment pauses. Production decisions get delayed by weeks, then months. Small disruptions begin to matter. A storm, a labor dispute, a political statement that would have been ignored before. Prices move faster than explanations. Volatility returns, but now there's no slack to absorb it. Consumers feel it first, not as panic, as friction. Commutes cost more, shipping surcharges appear, budgets stop balancing the way they used to. Companies respond by cutting, not strategy. Costs, hiring freezes, deferred maintenance, deferred wages. None of this makes the news yet. It's too incremental, too technical, but the system is now oscillating, tightening and loosening without settling. And oscillating systems don't stabilize themselves. They amplify because every response arrives late. Every adjustment overshoots. This is the second mini crisis, not a collapse, a loss of rhythm. And once a system loses rhythm, it doesn't need a catastrophe to fail. It just needs one more push. At this point, the system stops being abstract because now it reaches you, not in headlines, in routines. You don't notice it all at once. You notice it when a normal month stops fitting together, when the math that used to work doesn't. You drive the same distance, but it costs more. You earn the same paycheck, but it covers less. You don't feel poorer. You feel tighter, less margin, less room to absorb anything unexpected. And here's the cruel part. None of your decisions were reckless. You didn't speculate. You didn't gamble. You followed the signals you were given. Live here. Buy this. Trust that stability is the default. So when costs rise, there's nowhere to pivot quickly. You can't move closer overnight. You can't change infrastructure built around your life. This is how systemic stress feels at the human level, not like fear, like exhaustion. If this resonates, don't dismiss it as personal mismanagement. It isn't. And if you want to understand why so many people feel stuck at the same time, stay with me. Because what you're experiencing isn't isolated. It's synchronized. Once stress becomes synchronized, it doesn't stay local. Because energy isn't just another input, it's the connective tissue. When prices move, They move everywhere at once, across borders, across currencies, across systems that were never designed to adjust in unison. Manufacturing hubs feel it through transport costs. Food systems feel it through fertilizer and freight. Emerging economies feel it through debt because energy prices are denominated in dollars they don't control. A small shock in supply becomes a large shock in access. Not because the oil is gone, but because the margin is, countries start making defensive choices, stockpiling, subsidizing, restricting exports to protect domestic stability. Those choices make sense individually. Collectively, they tighten the system further. Trade slows. Insurance costs rise. Shipping lanes become risk calculations instead of assumptions. This is when volatility becomes contagious, when one region's instability becomes another region's inflation. And the most dangerous part is timing. These effects lag by months, sometimes years. So when they arrive, they feel disconnected from the cause, like a surprise, like bad luck. But they're not random. They're the echo. And once the echo starts moving through the system, it doesn't stop at borders. It looks for the weakest link. From here, the future doesn't branch into dozens of possibilities. It narrows into three. Not predictions, paths. The first is adjustment. Prices rise, but slowly enough that the system can rebalance. Investment returns. Capacity comes back online before damage compounds. Households cut back, but not enough to trigger collapse. This path requires time, coordination, and restraint. Those are rare ingredients. The second is erosion. More likely, prices spike, then retreat, then spike again. Each swing small enough to be explained away, but each one strips a little more margin. Savings erode, maintenance is deferred. Debt becomes structural, not temporary. Nothing breaks all at once. The system just thins quietly. The third path is rupture, a sharp break, a shock that arrives faster than response time. Supply drops, prices leap, confidence vanishes, decisions freeze, and because so much was built on the assumption of stability, reversal isn't gradual. It's discontinuous. The system doesn't choose among these paths. Circumstances do, and here's the tension that remains unresolved. All three futures can begin the same way. With relief, with falling prices, with celebration, which means you won't know which path you're on until you're already moving. That's the acceleration. There's a reason this never ends with reassurance, because systems like this don't fail loudly at first. They fail politely. They fail while telling you everything is improving. You will be shown lower numbers, short-term wins, charts that slope in the right direction, and you will be encouraged to lock those conditions into your life, into contracts, into commutes, into assumptions about what normal costs. That's not deception. That's how the system recruits you. By the time the signal changes, it's already late. Not too late to survive. Too late to stay unchanged. This isn't about panic. It's about attention, about recognizing that the most dangerous moment in any cycle is the one that feels like relief, the moment when everyone stops asking questions. If you take one thing from this, let it be this. Permanent decisions made during temporary conditions don't disappear when conditions change. They wait, and whatever comes next will not announce itself as a crisis. It will arrive disguised as normal volatility until suddenly it isn't. If you want to understand what to watch next, not headlines, not noise, but the indicators that actually precede the break, that's where we're going next, because the flood is only the beginning. And the question now isn't whether the pattern holds, it's whether you recognize it before it finishes closing.